Today, I'm super excited to speak with Dustin Matthews. Dustin is someone I've had the pleasure of working very close with over the last few months. And his business, Event Growth Formulas, has done something that none of the businesses I've worked so far have done. And that is, last month, the business hit $1 million annualized recurring revenue in 1 month as a result of implementing the Revpact system. So I'm super excited to share maybe some of Dustin's insights from the experience of working with Revpact so that people on the other side of this can, one, get some insights, and then two, maybe be inspired to make some changes in their own business. Because my hope is from our conversation that people watching this will realize it doesn't take a massive overhaul to get outsized returns, particularly from your sales process. So yeah, without further ado, Dustin, yeah, maybe just give a quick introduction about yourself, your role with the company, and
so we specialize at Event Growth Formula in putting people into live events. So the easiest way, although I hate saying it, Alan, is to think of us like an agency. I like to think that we're a partner with our clients. And so for us, we don't play the, let's go get 1 million clients game. We're very strategic. We're very smart in who we want to work with as operators. And so we specialize in, working with people that are using live events to grow their business. And so that looks like authors, coaches, speakers, but also we're working with a private health insurance company. We're talking to a solar and home automation company to leverage the power of one-to-many. And so my role here at the company is revenue. And so I'm chasing revenue, and that looks like going and getting new clients, but also how do we monetize and bring value and services to our existing client base to pull out even more revenue for us, but also for them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And before I forget, Dustin's being pretty modest, right? Dustin's business, they've worked with some of the biggest names in speaking. Would you maybe like to share some of those, Dustin?
Sure, for sure. And Alan, sometimes the trick is sometimes when people hear these names, they're like, oh, well, I'm not even in the speaking or event business, or, I'm not these people that I'm about to mention. So sometimes I'm a little humble with that, just because I know the power of events. And I suspect if someone's watching this, they've been to an event or an online event for sure, a webinar. And so we have worked with some names that you would recognize, like Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. We've worked with, the sharks on Shark Tank in terms of being on our clients' stages and events. Some names that people might know are Aspire and LifeSurge. These are the largest promoters, if you will, of educational events here in the United States, filling arenas of 5,000, 8,000 people. And so what's interesting, Alan, is I get to have sales conversations with folks that are at the top of the world, and how people would look at them filling 8,000. But then also too, I'll be talking to a doctor tomorrow that wants to market peptides. And so the number one mistake I tell people is like, hey, listen, even if you don't consider yourself an author, speaker, or coach, leveraging events is extremely impactful. And I'll say this, Alan, when you combine what Alan shares with you in the Revpact system, obviously in a one-to-one, but you also do it in a one-to-many environment, that's an explosive thing. So.
Okay, as you can see, Dustin is now taking on some of the principles that we work together. He's killing it in the sales process for the business, which we'll go into a bit later. But maybe before we go there, can you maybe briefly walk through, I guess, before we started working together, like what were some of the biggest challenges you guys were dealing with as it pertained to sales?
Yeah, I say it's interesting, if you're in front of Revpact or you're in front of Alan, I think people show up, if you believe in that sort of thing, when the timing is right. I think there's a saying, Alan, you probably know it, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And this was very similar. And so what did that look like? It was messy before working with Alan. And what I mean is, there's no short, you can see the books behind me. There's no shortage of sales books and funnels and business strategies to help grow your business. And so we had adopted an audit type strategy, and it was clunky. And so I was delivering 20-page PDFs. I had no slide deck and no visuals. And so, you know, it's easy to go over there to the shelf and get a book and go implement a strategy. But really, Alan, what you gave us, and I know we're probably jumping the gun,
Yep.
but what you gave us is clarity, and you gave us a third-party view, which you don't get from books. And so what did it look like was your question. It was messy. It wasn't as persuasive. It wasn't as influential as it could be. We had the seed. I'd like to think we had the seed of the sales process, but it was going to take us a long time to figure it out through trial and error, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. So I like the fact that you mentioned, you know, you can go to the books, you can go to YouTube, or what a lot of people are doing now, they're going to AI, but still things aren't changing. I guess for you, Dustin, like recognizing these challenges, how was this, I guess, impacting revenue, growth, your time? Because I guess one of the things that jumps out based off what you shared was, I guess largely the sales process might have been highly inefficient, but I guess how was that maybe affecting revenue, close rates, things like that?
Yeah. So revenue, quite frankly, we were in a jam, and we were in a downturn, if I can be direct. And so we knew we wanted a sales process. I was starting to execute on that sales process, and we were in a tough spot. What I also would say is, I think the biggest value, aside from what we'll talk about in the revenue and points that we put on the board, the Revpact system, and Alan, you specifically working with us and your coaches, it was giving the executive team alignment. And so I was brought in as the chief revenue officer to go do it. But, you know, if you don't get alignment from the top, you throw out an idea, right? Because you see an opportunity and it's like, oh, maybe, or, hey, let's go after that market. And so the accountability, Alan, I think that was the biggest thing, not just for myself, but also for the exec team. And so I think if people are watching this and they're in a similar boat with me as a CRO brought in to help, or if they're the founder that maybe brought in a VP of sales or something like that, if there is not alignment at the top, it's going to be very hard to get the results that anyone is looking for here. And so that's the biggest value, I would say, is you helped us get alignment, and you gave us permission to go take those steps and test and get real world feedback versus sitting in the virtual room and saying, I think we should do this. And the guy over here says, I think we should go over here. That's not good, right? Because you're not taking action.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's not something I hear too often. I witness it, but I don't hear the people I work with speak about it in that way. And I guess to maybe elaborate on what you said, Dustin, is when someone like me comes in, I mean, I don't have any biases,
right?
Which then means I can speak very frank, and I'll tell you where I see the issues. And then once everyone is aligned on the issues, it becomes very fast to actually solve it, because it's not a case of you have an idea, the CEO has another idea, the other business partner. And so if you have all these ideas clashing, it's going to slow you down. But if you have someone else, like a third party, come in, then you can start moving faster when you, I guess, respect and trust the feedback that's coming in, right?
That's exactly right. Absolutely.
Now, in terms of numbers, did you, let's say if we're talking about close rate, was that something that you had tracked before, I guess, before we started working together? Or maybe before I hit you with some metrics.
Yeah.
Even the step before us working together, Dustin, I guess, what did you guys try to maybe fix what was going on at sales? Like, did you work with other companies to try to get a handle on this? What did you try?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, just what immediately pops in my head was referrals. We were playing the referral games, and we still do. Like, that's a great lead to talk to. Anyone will tell you that in business. So it was really, I had a whiteboard behind me downstairs, and I put the list. And I put the words from Notre Dame, which was play like a champion today, but instead it was outflow like a champion. It was, pick up the phone and call. So my strategy was whiteboard list, call people, and just make something happen. we had, actually, this is spawning other ideas. Alan, we're the best in the world at filling live events and building funnels. The challenge that we had, and maybe this goes back to the alignment piece, was our team internally had built a funnel. So we had gone down the road ourselves of building a funnel, but I don't, it's like the cobbler's son, as they say. If you're not a paying client, you get, even though it's our own asset, you get deprioritized. And so what I found was, we had half built a funnel, the team internally wasn't aligned. And so we had tried doing that as a funnel. I had made the list and started calling people. And that was really it, Alan, in terms of, what we tried. Yeah, I know that sounds so simplistic, but that's where we were at that point.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. What also came to mind as well, Dustin, I think before we started working together, were you working with like another sales type company who were
yeah.
that?
Thanks for the reminder. Yes. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. So what was, before you even started working with them, what was the objective? Because you could, if there's a fly in the wall looking at this, they could maybe think maybe Revpact and this business offer something similar. So I guess, what problem were you looking to solve with this business? And then ultimately, did they solve that problem?
So I would say what they did was they helped in that step of clarity, but ultimately we weren't fully aligned. So as you know, with coaching and, done with you type programs and consulting type services, it puts a container around what you're trying to do versus just sitting again back in that room saying, oh, I think we should try this and do that. So that program was helpful in terms of just now we were all in the same boat, right? We might not have been rowing the right direction. And so what did Revpact do that plussed it? What you made us do was say, hey, let's go take some swings. So like there was enough assets lying around. It wasn't perfect. It never is going to be perfect. Sales is always changing. The market's changing. Your presentation's changing. The scripts are changing. And so to dial it in. And so what Alan, you helped us do and Revpact helped us do was take some at bats, go out there, have some conversations and get some input from the clients to really get us going. So we went from theory and kind of like, hey, this is good. Now we were having calls, and then obviously we put points on the board and made sales in that month. And then it was like, wow, let's go.
Okay, cool. And so maybe, yeah, let's get into some numbers, because I think when we first started working together, it might have been December 2025. Time is going by fast. Like, can you maybe walk through, I guess, maybe in terms of, you can share revenue, close rates, but like, what did you start seeing from, I guess, when we started working together to, I guess, the preceding 30, 60, 90 days?
Yeah, I would say really, we may have signed in December, but everyone knows there's holidays and people are out and all that. So I'm not sure we did a substantial amount of work in December, but really it was January. And the timing was interesting because that's when the downturn happened in our business. To give people a little backstory, we were very fortunate in that we partner with our clients. And so for the longest time, we have RevShare, and two of our biggest clients were floating the whole business, really. It covered up the fact that we did not have a sound sales process. So when that stream started dying down, then we needed to get back in the game and really make a sales engine. And so in January, we had some tough conversations. We had to let some people go in that. And so it was, hey, we need to get this going. And so what ended up happening was, but by the end of January, we had to immediately course correct. I started doing those calls on the board. I started setting up appointments. And what I would do in February, I had real legitimate appointments with qualified folks. Doing what we had a little momentum on, I sold them audits. And so our model was, we sold a $3,500 audit. And the goal wasn't to sell audits. It was to actually get retainer clients, a build fee, and then some sort of reoccurring revenue with some sort of upside as well. And so in the month of February, I was selling a few audits right? Wasn't the big sell.
Yep.
And these audits take a week right now, 2 weeks to go. And so March is when things really started popping. And that's when we sold 100,000 in revenue. That's just upfront build fees. And we were at 70,000 in reoccurring from those clients in the month of March. So if I say like in January, we really started working, calls were happening in February, closes were happening in March. And in 90 days, we had 100,000 in upfront revenue, like cash in the bank account, with 70,000 reoccurring right within 90 days. And then the next month put us over that $1 million in reoccurring revenue if you annualize that out. And so in a very short time, we were able to put some points on the board, obviously with your guidance and help.
Yeah. So the reason I do, I guess, interviews or testimonial videos like this, Dustin, is to maybe add some weight to the claims that we make. Because as a business, if I say, you know, if I work with future partners down the line and say, I'll get you $1 million in 90 days, they won't believe me, right? So at least they're going to watch this and they're probably going to be interested, right? So if we can maybe unpack this a small bit, because really like that amount of growth in that amount of time for a lot of businesses is unprecedented, right? So I guess for you guys, Dustin, what specifically did we start to change that started to kind of, let's say, get the sales engine together? What were the levers that we started to pull that started to have the kind of the 80-20?
I think the first thing was a discovery call. When I would get on the phone, it was more like I was consulting. You know, in an agency, we're often consulting internally each other, right? Like, what's the strategy? What are we doing? And consulting is different than selling. And so I would get on the call and I would be, you know, giving away free advice and saying, oh, I do it this way. And not, you know, like it was adding value for sure in the conversation, but it wasn't necessarily leading to the sale or teeing up the sales conversation. And so the first thing I think it was the discovery call. So we went from a very unorganized, you know, what are the questions we're going to ask, you know, the frameworks that you share with us. And we put together that into a script that I pull up to this day. I have it up on when I chat with people, I have that up. The thing that got me most excited, though, so I appreciated having that. The thing that got me most excited was I was in my head, and I think we all were, where when we sell an audit, we got to deliver, you know, like this 25 page doc because they paid $3,500. And Alan, you challenged our thinking, and you said, and we were doing that, but we weren't getting sales. So we were making $3,500, but that wasn't cutting it, as you can imagine. And so you really challenged us and said, listen, people are visual. You got to have a deck. And Alan, the craziest thing was I had a business prior to this. For 9 years, I had a partner in this business. We used to teach people how to speak and sell from stage. Well, every speaker in this modern era is using a PowerPoint slide deck. I do not know why it didn't occur to put a deck together. And so Alan said something, and then, like, you know, sometimes when you're like so deep in something, right? Or maybe you're feeling a little bit of fear, right? Because the numbers aren't where you want to be. You sort of forget things that you have access to, right? And so you said, we got to have a deck. And I'm like, oh, duh. And so having the deck actually gave me a lot of confidence because it put me personally back in that seat. And then also having a deck too, it takes a lot of pressure off of this. Like right now we're just talking heads. But if I can go to a deck and I can look at a slide and show a powerful visual, we all know it's, you know, subconscious selling. There's other things than the words that are helping us sell. But also it was a trigger point because I'd forget. Oh yeah. Work with Tony Robbins, right? You had to remind me, work with Tony Robbins, work with ''𝐸'', work with this, you know, all those people. But if I got it on the slide, I'm forced to communicate that story. So that was another critical piece, Alan, was the sales piece. And then finally was the offer. It was the, not the offer, but the presentation of the agreement or the contract. And so oftentimes we would, you know, send an agreement. It was legal-ish, you know, it really would grind the sales process down. And so we actually retooled how this happens. And we created a software with AI. And so our software now sends out what do I want to call it? An entry-level version of the agreement. And then there's a terms and service. I'm getting tactical here, but you helped us re-engineer so that more of these things would get accepted, and or the process of getting an agreement signed and money in the bank account started to go down substantially.
Got it. And I guess if people are listening to this, what they might, one way they could perceive this is, okay, so for my business, all we need is just scripts. We need to get a deck. We need to redo the contract, and then we're going to get the same results as Dustin, right? Realistically, from my experience, that doesn't happen, right? So based off, I guess, the things that we were working on, Dustin, what was it about the process, the strategy, the scripts that actually made it work? Because now anyone can go into AI and say, create me a sales SOP on how to do discovery. Why do you think, well, firstly, what was your conversion rate after implementing these changes? And why do you think it had such a disproportionate return on your efforts by having this?
Yeah, I would say our audit closing rate, just to sell the audit, went to about 90%. The close rate was about 75%. And we knew that going into some of these audits. They were already working with an agency. These were some of the ones that we didn't capture were very tough. With that said, I think the value, Alan, too, was you coached us through the process. So you took us through a framework, a few frameworks. But if we had a deal on the line later that day, I remember a couple calls where we had a deal on the line later that day. You're like, hey, show me the deck. Show me how you're thinking, talk how you're thinking about it. And we were able to get live implementation feedback. And so could you go to AI and get that? Maybe, but AI doesn't have the reps that, Alan and the coaches and Revpact have, like situational what's going on. And then also too, it doesn't have that situational knowledge. I think when you go to an AI, it'll just give you a blanket sales thing. Well, if you're in B2B, that might be different than selling B2C, right? If you're selling an agency type services versus a coaching program, that's going to be different. If you're selling, advertising at Twitter, right, or X or whatever, like that B2B play, it's going to be different. And so we were very fortunate that you had, that breadth of knowledge and were giving us that real lifetime feedback. And I think more than anything with AI, Alan, it hallucinates. And so we still are at that point where we're like, I don't know, is this right? Like there's that doubt, right? And so obviously working with Alan and who's been there, who's sold, who's coaching people all around the world to sell. When Alan told me something, like there was no question of like, is he hallucinating, right? It was like, and that gives you confidence, right? And you got to have that when you do these calls, is you got to have that confidence. You got to transfer that feeling of confidence from you to them, to the prospect. So that's what I would say, Alan, in terms of like, sure, you could go get AI to do it, but you're just not going to see those same results. You're not going to have that level of confidence, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. So confidence is one thing, and then when you have that confidence, you can start moving a lot faster.
That's right.
You're not second guessing yourself as much. I guess for you, when you were going through this process of working together, Dustin, what was the moment that you realized, okay, this is working and this is effective? Was there any like trigger in your head that made you go, oh wow, this is different?
Yeah, there was one. This was great. So in the past, again, because we have been marketers, I would say, and we're looking for long-term clients. It's more of like a higher end partnership sale. Oftentimes, Alan, in the sales process, as you know, we would do like these discovery calls for free. We would spend like 2 or 3 hours. And so I remember distinctly, we had one client, and I'm so grateful because Alan, this client is coming close to close, but it's taken forever. And I'm glad we did it this way. So in the sales process, we're working with this client, and I think we had 2 calls, and they were new to this world. So it was a lot of like education and hand-holding versus somebody already in the business and understands the value that we bring. And so we were like training them on the business. And I woke up and I said, man, we got to sell them an audit. So I came to you and you're like, this is how I would do it. Because we were already down the road of like, this is kind of how we do it. We get to know you, all that. And so you helped me immediately course correct and say, hey, listen, let's sell these guys an audit. And I'm so grateful that we did, because essentially we probably would have done like 2 or 3 weeks of free consulting to get the sale. And so instead we were paid we were paid our audit fee to do it, which all made us feel better, which made us want to play the game a little bit different, or a lot different, right? Because we weren't thinking, oh gosh, they're just sucking our brains dry. We were getting a value exchange. And so now I'm grateful because this one is taking a little bit longer to close. They want to go at their own pace, but it is coming to close here. And so because we did that, Alan, if we hadn't sort of boxed in is not a great way to say this, but we got them to commit financially. And so that essentially almost puts a cage around them. Yeah, they could go talk to other agencies and other people, but they're not likely to do it because they've already invested, you know, that $3,500 and we're delivering lots of value. And so that was the point, Alan, when I'm like, this is how we have to do it. No more getting on calls and speaking for, you know, 2 hours, you know, multiple calls to close a sale. They got to pay. And like, that's just the way that we're going to engineer our sales process and our model. So that's when I knew.
Amazing. And so people who are watching this, I hope they really grasp what you said, because a lot of the, I guess, false assumptions that people in sales and founders have when it comes to sales, they have this belief that they just have to keep giving value on the calls.
Yeah.
And part of that is true, but you need to give strategic value at strategic times. Because if you keep giving value, what is the prospect going to think at the end? I don't need them. I don't need them anymore. They've given me everything. And that's not true. That's not true, because a prospect can't feel and see everything that the business can offer. But when you're in this type of scenario where you're on a Zoom call or whatever, that's how the buyer is interpreting the meaning. So maybe now, if we can slightly shift gears to know what's possible, Dustin, I think going through that process and having that phenomenal growth that you're now experiencing, which is quite a change from when we initially started working together. You had to do some layoffs and things like that. What's now possible in the business that wasn't before?
Well, I can tell you immediately, like, the transformation. So coming out, even in the month of March, towards the end, before it closed, there was a sense of relief. Obviously, right? How cash is like oxygen in your business. So that was the first thing, right? To get out of essentially a dangerous situation that we were facing. So immediately there was a level of, oh wow, okay, like we can do this, and this does work. We just have to focus on it, and we need to create systems and have systems. And so that was the first thing, is that immediate sense of relief. But then also too, internally, as you mentioned, you know, when you have to, you know, when you're not seeing a coworker show up on meetings, right, the morale goes down. You know, people are on edge. That aren't, you know, that are on the fulfillment team, right? They don't know what's happening. They don't know what's going on. The rumor mill's going, right? And so when they see new clients coming in, right, everyone naturally gets new clients mean more money to the organization. And so there was a level of excitement, first, obviously, at the leadership team, the executive team, and then also too throughout the organization, an excitement that, hey, wow, we're bringing on fresh new clients. And so that's, those are the two most foundational important things, I think, in an organization, culture, if you will. And so now what's possible is we have some breathing room. We have the ability to make different choices, make some investments, right, to generate leads. Whereas before it was like, go get your board and put them all up on a thing and start calling. And so now we're starting to bring in leads online. We're starting to do some cold outreach as well and develop other sales channels and marketing channels. And so for us, I mean, what's possible is now building a machine that creates this, not just, you know, one-off referral type situation. In business, the goal is to have machines in every part. And so now we have, you know, a sales machine and a lead machine that's starting to crank.
Okay, so things are cranking up. Things sound very exciting. If worst case scenario, if we hadn't had worked together, Dustin, where do you think the business would be? What do you think would have happened?
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't want to think about it. Yeah, I think maybe, I mean, to be honest, I think maybe more tough conversations, right? You've got to have a system of getting clients. And Alan, this is what I want to share. Obviously, it would have been way worse. It would have been bad. I think if I were to just share a message with people out there, sometimes you get wooed into having a false sense that like your business is good. And that was us, meaning like we had designed the business in a way where we had upside and we were getting it, but it really masked other parts of the business. Like we didn't really have a sales engine and we weren't focused on it, right? We were focused on other things in the business. And so what I would tell to someone watching is, hey, you might think you have a good right now, you might think you might have a sales challenge, but I were to say, like, if you lost, 1, 2, 3 of your top clients, would you be in a world of hurt? And if that's the answer, then you got to fix that problem, right? If it is to go get new clients. And so I think we were in that situation, Alan, where we had a great business and we had great margin. And then the 2 biggest sources of revenue went away. And then we were like in a world of hurt. And so had we had done this a year ago, I wouldn't be doing this interview in this manner saying like things were grim. We would have caught it off before the pass. And I know a lot of people, Alan, you teach this, if they don't realize the pain that they have, it's hard to get them to act. At that time, we didn't know Alan, we didn't know Revpact, but we didn't have pain then. And so to the prudent, smart executive or founder, I would say you want to be thinking, ahead and really ask yourself the tough questions. If my top 3 clients went away, or 1 or 2, what would happen? And if the answer is I need to prep now and get a sales system in place, you better fix it now, because business is cyclical, ups and downs, right? So that's my answer.
Yeah, no, and I think that's such an important message for now, because I think the agency model is going to be massively disrupted over the next few years, particularly from AI. I'm already seeing it with some other businesses that instead of using an agency, they're bringing it in internally, and they're going to develop AI agents instead of working with agencies. So agencies need to adapt fast and have a strong client acquisition system so they can rely on. Now, maybe just to elaborate on what you said, right? Maybe speaking to the founder, the head of sales, who recognizes they do have a sales problem. What would you say to that person who thinks they can solve the sales problem themselves? Because this is something I see. Yeah.
It's funny because I know the answer to this. And what I want to say is, listen, whoever your favorite sports star is, and Alan, you're going to have to forgive me. I know you have an international audience, but this naive American, I want to say, Tiger Woods and Tom Brady, right? Just pick your favorite sports star, Ronaldo. I know he's down there, Beckham. I know these are all the old ones, right? But pick your favorite sports star. They all have coaches, and many of them have multiple coaches. They have a nutrition coach if they're smart. They have a swing coach. They have, a physical trainer. And so there's a reason for that, right? To be the best in the world. And I think if you're in sales, like, you have that competitive spirit. You probably were an athlete or a gamer, and you have a need to win and you like to win. What I would say is you got to have a coach. You got to have at least somebody there. And like AI, go do that. But there's nothing like someone kicking you in the butt, or when you're down and you maybe your close rate's down and the coach needs to be motivational. Having someone to kind of read that, right, and get you back up is valuable. So for the guy that thinks they can do it themselves, maybe you can pull it off, but it's going to take you longer. You'll probably be an emotional roller coaster. What I would say is having a third party, someone outside, right? Obviously you could have the executive team, but they're thinking of a million other things in their lanes. Having somebody look over your shoulder, look at your decks, listen to your sales calls, that's huge. It's valuable, and you need it, right?
Thanks for sharing that, Dustin. And maybe the last question on this. So let's say the person recognizes the problem. They also recognize maybe they're not the best person to solve it, because if they're the founder, they have so many other fires to put out and so many other balls to juggle. What would you say to that person who's still on the fence, who maybe thinks, really, should I invest in this? Will I get my ROI?
Well, two things come to mind. I mean, obviously the answer is, when you make a commitment, I think people show up, like I said earlier, show up in your life. So if you are thinking that you have a sales challenge, or you want to just improve your sales process, I think there's a reason why you're watching this video. There's a reason why you're talking to the Revpact team, maybe even talking to Alan. So that's first and foremost. I would say the second thing is, for a founder who is maybe not going to be the salesperson, having a right-hand person, your VP of sales, your director of sales, or whatever, come to this is valuable. This is the situation we were. So the two founders of the agency were on these calls with me, the chief revenue officer, to ensure and get alignment. So what I would say is, you might be thinking, well, gosh, I don't really want to get sales training and do it. That's fine if you're a founder and that's not going to be your role. But I would say, move forward, bring your sales guy, educate them. You as a leader are supposed to create a culture of leadership and empower your people with resources. And so there's no better resource to give to your head of sales than a coach, a mentor, and really a process. The only caveat I'd say, or the icing on that, is you gotta let them fly. You gotta get behind it. You gotta give them confidence. You gotta be aligned to let them do it and have some autonomy, is what I would say. And then ultimately, if you're the sales director, I think you should do everyone's sales program. And here's why. You know, back to Tiger Woods and Tom Brady and your favorite sports star, they have different coaches at different points of their life. And so I'm a fan of it. If you want to get better and you're committed to your craft, if you have a desire to win, then you should do them all. But since you're watching this video, you should do Alan's right now. You should do Revpact right now and get that, because he can accelerate your timeline a lot quicker than you think. And I know that might be hard to think, oh, I'm good, but the accountability, the systems, the frameworks, heck, the decks that you already had, I didn't have to create from scratch. You gave me templates, outlines to ramp up, and then you gave me the feedback to tweak it. So that's what I would say. Do it now and fix the sales problem or improve your process.
And to the last stickler who's extremely money focused, right? Can you maybe share, I guess, if you can recall, what specific ROI you guys got as a result of working with Revpact? Obviously, you talked about the time, but in terms of numbers, was it 10x, 20x, 50x?
Well, in 90 days, I think it was a 4x, if I remember correctly. The package that we invested in, I think it was a 4x. That's, Alan, just on build fees. And then we've got $1 million in annual reoccurring revenue. So that's the short-term ROI. And listen, if you only got half of that, would you be okay with that? And the answer should be yes, even if you got a quarter of it. And here's why. We're not done. Like, so we've got now, like, we're going up the mountain, we've got more to climb, but now we have gear, we have resources, right? And so as we layer in more leads, right, we can add more sales reps, right? Because now we have a system, a playbook, a process, and we can grow. So that will only compound over time. And so the ROI on it would be, I don't know if infinite, if the FTC or the, regulatory agencies would be happy with that. But I mean, your ROI would grow over time, as long as you're using the playbooks and the things that you're supposed to be using.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, Dustin. And again, yeah, I'm super, what would I say? One, grateful to have worked with you guys and continue to work with you guys, because I think now that you have these problems solved,
yeah,
the sky's the limit. I really think in your space, now that these fundamentals are in place, you guys can go out and win in the market, really capture the market. And then who knows, maybe in a couple of years' time, you want to be in a position where, who knows, maybe you exit.
Yeah. We would love that, to be in that spot, right? To have that business, obviously that spits off cash flow, but also to be in a spot to be able to sell. No one's going to buy your business if you don't have a repeatable sales process, right? That's one of the criteria. Just think about it. Would you go buy that business if it was all founder led or it was all referral? No, you have to create a system. And so even if you never want to exit, just the anxiety that disappears and the stress of not knowing where your next sale is going to come from is worth it for sure.